Hello Honors Chemistry and welcome to one last video covering the concept of naming. So I'm just going to work through all of these and what I'm putting on my paper and thinking about is what you should be doing on your paper and thinking about, right? So just, see how it's going for you, right? And if you're thinking about these things, and if you're not, then maybe you need to tweak your studying or maybe your study sheet if you're missing some steps or whatever the case may be. All right, so if I were naming this, I would look at the hydro part, and that tells me it is a binary acid, right? Which means it's going to be composed of hydrogen with its +1, and in this case chlor, so chlorine with its -1. So +1, -1, that means I need one of each, HCl. Next up, I have ic acid, right? Means it's an oxy acid, and it comes from the 8 version, so chlor8. So in this case, I have H plus and I have ClO3 minus, right? So it's +1, -1, I need one of each. So HClO3, right? Here, there is this 2 that tells me, that's the charge there, right? I see an 8 and a per, which means that this is a type 2 polyionic, right? And so if we look at that, I know that cobalt has a charge of +2, and I know that perchlorate has a charge of -1, and I need one of these, 2 of those. So my formula is going to be cobalt and 2 perchlorates. Selenium dibromide, so I'd look at this ide, probably binary, right? That's what this part means. Di is a molecular prefix, and I would go check my periodic table, and I would see that I indeed have 2 nonmetals, which means that this is molecular, which means that I will just write what it says, SeBr2. Sodium oxide, here we have the ide ending, which tells us binary, probably. Here we have a metal, right? So this is a type 1 ionic. And so we have +1 for sodium, -2 for oxide, which means my formula is going to be Na2O. Here we have 3, again, big clue, 8. So I know that chromium has a charge, so this is a type 2 ionic, poly, right? And so it's going to be a +3. Phosphate is -3, which means I actually just need one of each, so CrPO4. Nitrous acid, right, means this is an oxy acid, and it comes from the ite version, so nitrite, and so that's going to be +1, -1, one of each, HNO2. Tetra, and the ide, so this is molecular, because I would look at my periodic table and see that indeed it's 2 nonmetals, right? The ide tells us that it's binary, right? So I'll just write what it says, which is N2O4. Strontium carbonate, 8. This is a metal, so I have a type 1 ionic. I'm going to balance my charges. It's going to be +2, -2, which means I need one of each. So SrCO3. Here, lithium bicarbonate, +1 for lithium, -1 for bicarbonate, right? I need one of each, LiHCO3. Here we have potassium, which means that this must be a polyatomic ion, right? So here we have a type 1 poly, right? So ionic compound. And so it's going to be the full name and full name, right? So potassium bicarbonate. Nope. Potassium bisulfate. Or if you prefer, hydrogen sulfate. Either is fine. Next up we have this, where we have the H, which tells us acid. This is a polyatomic ion, which tells us that it contains a poly, right? And then if we look at this polyatomic ion is called carbonate, which means it becomes carbonic acid, okay? Here we'd look at our periodic table and say, okay, well, it's binary, and both of these are nonmetals. 2 nonmetals, right? So I'm just going to write what it says, right? So it is silicon tetra, and then just make sure you spell fluoride correctly. Okay, next up we have, again, a metal, but this time it's type 1, and poly, and so we just name it, right? Barium, and that is permanganate. And if we say all of it, we will spell it correctly. Here we're like, so many, but once you've memorized ammonium, you'll always recognize it. And then you'd recognize that the rest of that must also be a polyatomic ion. And then again, we treat ammonium as if it is a type 1, right? And so we would just name this as it is, right? Ammonium cyanide. Next up, we see, metal. And this is a type 2, so type 2 metal, poly. And so we're going to work backwards, right? So I don't know the charge of lead, but I know I have one of them. I do know the charge of chromate is -2, and I have one of those, which means that the charge of lead must be 2. So this will be lead 2 chromate. Next up, another metal, polyatomic ion. This is another type 2. So we'll work backwards again. I don't know the charge of iron. I do know I have one of them. This is chlorate's charge, and I have 3 of them, which means that X must be 3. So this is iron 3 chlorate. Here we have metal, poly, so this is a type 1 poly. And so magnesium, we'll just write its parts. Magnesium dichromate. Next up, we have this and this, so it's binary, which means it'll end with "ide." And we'd go look at our periodic table and check, and it is indeed 2 nonmetals. That says metals. And so we'll write what it says, which is arsenic trifluoride. And then here, we'd say, metal, poly, and this is a type 2 poly, so we have to work backwards again. I have one. No, I don't know the charge of this, but I have one. The charge of sulfite is -2, and I have one of them, right? Which means that my metal's charge must be 2, so it's mercury 2 sulfite. All right, so again, step 1 is always identify the type of compound, and after we identify the type of compound, then we can apply the proper naming rules to it. All right, make sure you're studying, because obviously you need to know the polyatomic ions and you need to know the rules, and then there is the practice. All right, and at this point you have enough that you could build your own library of questions to practice from, right? Or you could just print all the blanks and run them again. Whatever works for you. All right, thank you for listening. Be good, and I'll see you soon. Bye.